Lesbian Talk!
I actually know what number it is. It's episode 112.
Well, I hope you're right about that, because otherwise it's very embarrassing.
Oh, well, the heading will be right anyway. Usually I'm like, it's episode something. Welcome to this week's episode, we say, and we're like, well, we don't know.
Because the computer where the information is over the other part of the room.
It's like literally like 4 feet from me, I don't know.
But there's so much stuff in the way.
It's just a whole chair and everything.
Anyway, this time we're talking about...
No, wait, you're doing it wrong.
Oh.
How have you been this week, everybody? What's the crack? How you doing? Hope you've had a good week or two. Alright, now go.
No, I'm allowed to speak now.
Yes.
Well, this time we're talking about technically sort of two things, sort of, but there's one thing.
It's pop culture-ish, kind of.
And historical, and this one, Omega's going to be doing a lot of talking because she is like a genius on this subject.
No, I'm not a genius, I've just read a lot of stuff. Although it has been years since I've like reread all this stuff, so now like a lot of the stuff I've forgotten, then I might have to go back and reread it.
So anyway, like, Omega could write a book on this subject. It
Not
is
a very good book.
We are talking about the Franklin expedition.
And why has that become a new interest of yours recently?
Well, because I had a mean bout of insomnia, and I read chunks of Buried in Ice, the BD, where they found the bodies of Torrington and everything, and then I was like, it sort of grew from there.
Yes, but what pop culture tie-in are we describing?
Oh, okay. Yes, in October this year, not sure when in October, but it's definitely October. I know this because I bothered the main guy on Twitter about it, and he actually responded. The novel The Terror, which is based on the Franklin expedition, but takes what they knew at the time the novel was written and adds a giant myth bear creature to it, and it's being turned into a series in AMC.
It'll be just as good as The Walking Dead. Probably. Does AMC do The Walking Dead?
Yeah, but The Terror kind of has an end, while The Walking Dead just keeps going. But basically...
It keeps walking and walking and walking forever.
Yeah. But, honey, you should explain what the Franklin expedition is, because, like, at least one person's already Googled it.
That's true. Well, I mean, this is why the internet is great, because you could be listening to this and also looking it up at the same time.
Yeah, it's not a famous thing. I mean, at least it depends on your circle.
A little bit more famous, though.
Because of the Terror and stuff, but I am a big history buff.
No.
And, you can tell it from Bone Kickers, which, I did no research on my Bone Kickers reviews. So I know my history, but I had never heard of the Franklin expedition before I met you.
Da-da-da.
Because this is like,
And you're even British and everything.
What's the name of the quiz show where you get a specialist subject? I forget the name.
I don't know.
God damn it, Magnus Magnusson used to present it. Fuck.
Jeopardy?
No. It's a British one.
Eggheads?
No.
That's the only British one that I know.
Franklin expedition would be your specialist subject. Go.
Well, I just read it. So basically, the British Admiralty had always had in mind this life hack that they thought existed to get to Asia easier. Because to get to Asia, you'd have to sail all the fuck the way down the Atlantic, and then all the fuck the way around Africa, and then all the way over to India and stuff like that. And they were like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be some way over the top of... Are you drinking loudly on camera again?
Not deliberately. This thing's made of noise.
Okay, I see. And so that basically they had this theory that Canada wasn't altogether solid, and that there would be a path over Canada to get to Asia and Russia that would be a lot easier. Technically, they were right, but not really, because there are a lot of straits and there are a lot of islands up there. But in the time that this was taking place, it was all frozen solid. Especially because this also was... most of the search for the Northwest Passage occurred during a period of time called the Little Ice Age, which was about 400 or 500 years, where it was globally a lot colder. But now, because of global warming, the Northwest Passage is pretty viable again.
Yeah. So, what happened to the Franklin expedition, who were trying to search for this?
Well, we don't really know.
What
happened to some of them.
Start off with what we know happened.
Well, pretty much, John Franklin, he was given this expedition by the Admiralty kind of because they felt sorry for him. Like, he was a wee bit too old, and he was just kind of like one of those guys who rose to the incompetence of middle management. Like, he'd been on a really disastrous overland expedition where he'd ignored the advice of Inuits and Canadians that said, travel light, take sled dogs, trust us. And they're like, no, we'll do it the English way, thank you. And they ended up starving. A lot of them died. And the ones that survived, Franklin included, was because they cut up their own shoes and boiled the leather to make a stew out of. And he became known as the man who ate his own shoes. And he was governor of Tasmania for a while. He just kind of was just kicking around, and the Admiralty was like, well, you can lead this expedition. I mean, you won't really be the leader. You'll kind of be the leader in name only, but the shirt will be grand. And so this was actually a pretty well-outfitted expedition. Like, they had all the cutting-edge technology. They had 2 icebreaker ships that had steam locomotive engines kind of retrofitted into them.
This is 1845.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive.
So, like, kind of like the early Victorian era. And they were outfitted for 2 years. They figured it would take between 2 and 4 years to come out the other side, above Alaska.
Didn't they have enough supplies for like 5 years?
Yeah, but they figured. John Franklin told Lady Jane that they're saying 4 years, but I think we'll be through in 3. Because they didn't realize that it was the Little Ice Age, and all of those passages they thought exist were completely 100% ice-choked with glacial ice.
Yeah, and apparently those few years that they were up there were much worse than the ones right before it and right after it. So there was times when the ice didn't actually melt even in summer.
Yeah. So they figured, we'll just do all of our ice breaking during the Arctic summer. Sure, it'll be grand. So what you have to appreciate is they were already doomed before they even set out, and they had no idea of that. There was no way that they could have known.
And in the best bit of tempting fate, one of the officers, James Fitzjames, wrote a letter which was sent at their last stop at Greenland, where he actually said that he really hoped that they'd be trapped in the ice for at least one winter because it would be so exciting.
That's the one kid in your class is like, I hope there'll be a pop quiz today. That'll be really great. And you're like, nah.
Everyone gives James, in the afterlife, everyone gives James Fitzjames some serious side-eye.
And wedgies. And nuggies. But yeah, so they set out, and actually there was, let's see if I can remember correctly, 129 men, including Franklin, 2 dogs, a cat, and a monkey named Neptune.
Did we find out what happened to the animals? I'm guessing I know what happened, but do we have confirmation?
No, but
okay.
They probably died. I mean, if they didn't then, they're probably dead by now. So.
They were probably eaten. Because guess what happens when you're trapped in the ice for many, many years? And
scurvy.
You're amazed because they knew how to combat scurvy, obviously, by that point, but they did not realize that it loses its potency after several years.
Yeah, they had barrels of lemon juice. But here's the thing is that vitamins degrade, and vitamin C will degrade. So after, I think it's like a year and a half to 2 years, there's really no more potency in stored citrus juice. Now that obviously is not true of our modern juices, so don't go thinking that, you're gonna get scurvy, because you're not. It's very rare to get scurvy these days. Actually, you know where you see scurvy the most these days? In alcoholics.
Huh.
Because they're drinking so much, they're not really taking in a lot of solid food, and so it's very easy to find vitamin disorders.
Huh. So what happened to compound this bad situation?
Well,
because literally everything goes wrong.
It is. This is like the chaos theory of expeditions. So basically, they also had some new technology coming aboard the Erebus and the Terror, which is the name of the 2 ships, which like literally sounds like this was written for a Hollywood screenplay. Like, yes. We'll call the ships Erebus and Terror.
And in case you don't know, Erebus is a translation of hell.
Sure, this will be grand. But they had a relatively new technology, and that was canned food. And canned food was so new as a technology. The can opener hadn't been invented yet. You actually had to chop the can open with a hatchet or like a sharp knife or something. Like, I always thought that was pretty cool that canned food predated the can opener. But you had a kind of sneaky kind of guy named Goldner, and Goldner comes into the picture because he won a lot of the Admiralty contacts to supply this canned food, but he was kind of, no good. Like, he was the lowest bidder, but then he was always supplying stuff late or, like, literally right before the ship was about to sail. Officers, from expeditions that didn't, die came back and reported that, sometimes there was a lot of grit or bone or even stones weighed stuff down, that a lot of the food had gone off. So this was really, not a classy endeavor, but it was kind of interesting kind of Ponzi, not really Ponzi scheme, an interesting kind of scam, because you wouldn't know until you were years out to sea that this food was bad. And he'd already been paid, so he delivered a lot of this food literally at the last minute. And one of the problems with the canned food, although, people are starting to dispute this, is that it was such a new technology that the tins were made of tin, but they were soldered with a lead alloy. And lead, as we know, is water soluble, and it is sugar soluble. So it will, especially, not sugar soluble. It is sweet like sugar, but it is soluble in an acid. So things like tomatoes, things with a lower pH will absorb lead. So you have these when these tins didn't contain, like botulism spores or anything horrible like that, they're already full of lead.
Yeah, and now while lead won't kill you by itself, it will
It will eventually.
It doesn't tend to. It sort of exacerbates the other things, and they usually kill you.
Yeah, but if you have any kind of heavy metal poisoning will eventually overwhelm the brain.
Yeah, it'll take a long time. You're more likely to die of something else.
Yeah, that's true. That's technically
than lead itself. So,
I just don't want any chemists in the comments to be like, well, actually. And you're like, I know. Go on, finish talking.
So, you've got this horrible soup of just terrible things going on. And then on top of that, you've got the fact that the British...
That English spirit of, well, here we go, things and stuff. Manifest destiny.
They still... Okay. When trapped in the ice, after being trapped in the ice for about 18 months, and Franklin had died, and because the...
Well, keep in mind that, like, the first winter, it was expected that they would winter there. Like,
yeah.
Things were still going okay at that point in time.
Yeah, but then, by about 18... They found a cairn years later which had a message inside. The main message was everything's okay, and then there was a little addendum written about 4 months later, which is basically, Captain's dead, ship's abandoned, we're walking south to try and walk down Canada.
Or, we're not okay, we're not okay. You know that song by what's her face?
I don't know that song.
It's in My Chemical Romance. Oh. I think.
I try to avoid them.
If you know, well, it was like on the radio. This was like a song from like 2005.
So, by this point, apparently about...
And keep in mind that leaving cairns with messages in them was standard Admiralty procedure.
Yeah.
Like, that's how they left messages for later people to come along and be like, oh, that's what you got up to.
And one of the problems with this is the Inuit had apparently seen them do this, and metal is precious in the Arctic. So... Quite often, cairns were grabbed by the Inuit for the metal, and they threw the paper away, but the metal that the box that the paper was contained in. So
they're like, this is grand. We can do a lot of stuff with this.
There's very few of the cairns sort of left from the thing. So
information
is spotty.
We're talking about extreme northern Canada, like past none of it. We're talking about like
very north none of it, I think.
Like Victoria Island, that area. Do a search and for Beachy Island on Google Earth, and you can like creep around
Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
So they decide to walk down Canada. Now, ironically, if they had just gone
let's mention why they were trapped. They were icebound.
Yeah.
The ships became icebound, which is exactly what it sounds like, and they could either stay there and progressively starve to death or try to escape down Canada.
Though I've seen another theory, which is that they went down south to create a camp to try and get better hunting, and then they would send men periodically up to check the ships to see if they'd got better. So they...
How unprofessional.
And then they would... The idea was they'd run back up to the ships if there was something.
Run quickly! Make her go!
So that's just a theory. But
at some point, everything broke down.
Yes!
They were out of fresh food... So they were eating these canned rations, which of course were clotted with lead. In many cases, the food was not even good anymore. It was not a good season for hunting. Also, this has been something that the English had really stuck to during the age of Arctic exploration, was they just literally refused to believe the Inuit and the Canadians when they said use light sleds, and bring dogs, because if worse comes to worse, you can always eat the dogs. Which sounds horrible, but you have to think about survival at this point.
Yeah, and so the British, what they did was they had giant ships which were then laden with supplies, and then they were being pulled by like 20 guys on harnesses.
Well, no, this was just something specific to this expedition. Is they took the lifeboats out, and the lifeboats weighed like about 1.5 tons each, and rather than breaking them down to make lightweight sledges, they basically had officers, and by this point men alike, tied into harnesses, and they were like in teams of 20 man hauling sledges across the Arctic
while dying of
starvation
and
scurvy and everything else.
And apparently also everyone went mental.
Well, lead poisoning will do that too.
We're not sure exactly what happened, but there seems to be indication
compounded by things like starvation and all sorts of vitamin deficiencies and...
Yeah, at some point, cannibalism starts. Some guys, the ships were filled with really random things, like
copies
desks,
of the Vicar of Wakefield.
Yeah, desks and sort of silverware and stuff. Although I've seen a theory saying that trying to explain every single sort of item they chose, like the books could have been used for kindling, and the wooden items could be broken up for fire, and that the silver could be used to trade with the Inuit.
I mean, of all of the things, I'm thinking that the curtain rods have the most practical use because they could be used as tent poles.
Yeah, the understanding is they went crazy, but some people dispute that.
Yeah, and eventually none of them returned from wherever they'd gone. Now, some of them had been spotted. Well, okay, the Inuit in the area had given, because there were a lot. I'm getting ahead of myself. There were lots of expeditions that went after Franklin looking to find out what happened. Because several years passed, they hadn't heard anything, and Lady Jane Franklin finally pestered the Admiralty into sending another expedition to look for them. And basically, like, a lot of the Inuit testimony was disregarded by the Admiralty. They were like, but what do those savages know? Englishmen wouldn't have practiced cannibalism. They must be lying.
And one of the guys who was in the forefront of yelling about how horrible the Inuit are was Charles Dickens. That Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
Who even wrote a play insulting the guy who talked to the Inuit and discovered the evidence of cannibalism, because he obviously was making it up, and the Inuit were savages who probably murdered them. It's like, Jesus Christ, Charles Dickens.
Well, the interesting thing is, you can still find, and people still do, like people who are doing like extreme camping and like people up there to do climate research and stuff will still come across Franklin artifacts.
Yeah.
Like the tins of food, or like compasses, or like little teeny bits of modern detritus left behind. Now
the latest someone claims to have seen them was somewhere around 1852. I think they said a couple of Inuit said they saw like 4 guys going south. So even if that's not quite as late as they survived, these guys survived at least some guys probably survived at least 5 years in the Arctic walking south. It's like, I really hope it's not a case like the CIA. I think it was the CIA operative who escaped. I read about it in the book. He survived some sort of a fall of a government where the CIA had a presence, and so he tried to walk to safety for 800 miles over mountains. And then by the time he got to the friendly country, him and his friends were thought to be bandits, and they were gunned down.
Oh.
I can't remember what thing he was from, but I believe the country he was trying to get to was India. But hopefully it wasn't a situation like that where, some Quebecois fur trappers thought they were crazy Inuit people or whatever and gunned them down.
I highly doubt that. I mean, there's been lots of speculation. There have been lots and lots of books written about it.
And there's a lot of things that can kill you between the Arctic and, urbanized Canada.
Because there's a lot of Canada.
Yeah, there is.
Like, no offense, Canadian, because we have many Canadian friends who listen to the show, but no offense, you guys. There's a lot of your country.
Yeah.
It, goes on forever.
Yeah, and one of the last hard bits of evidence that they have is these guys who stayed for the winter with some Inuit, and an officer gave them a sword. And the sword was recovered. It it was traded by the Inuit to the Hudson Bay Company, and they still got it.
I want to go see it.
And
because they have it like apparently at their museum.
And you generally it was considered, because of what the Inuit said, that it might have been Crozier who was the Northern Irish captain of the Terror.
Francis Rawdon Moira Crozier.
Why is his middle name Moira?
Maybe it's after his mom.
He the idea was that it was his sword, that he did that because the guy said it was a word like Crozier. However, I saw some evidence from an author who writes about the subject who thinks that it's actually a Marine, because there was a detachment of Royal Marines for some reason. Guy called Tozer, because it sounds like Crozier, and he looked at the age and when this guy became an officer, became a Marine and all, because it's a Marine sword and it fits in perfectly.
Yeah, but it could have been someone else's sword that Crozier was in possession of.
Yeah, it could have been anyone's sword, but See,
my personal headcanon, and which had been for years, even before I read The Terror, was that, I mean, a lot of accounts did have Crozier as being the last officer standing. Yeah,
there's even a book about the Franklin expedition about Crozier called Last Man Standing. It's the myth is that he's the last guy to survive.
And here's the thing, he was done over by the Admiralty. He was an incredible officer, but he wasn't given the same kind of accord because he was Irish. And he technically should have been the leader of the entire expedition. Not that it would have fared any differently given the circumstances, but so he was kind of like done over for promotion, and I always felt bad for him, and my private headcanon was that he alone made it at least as far down as the mouth of the Great Fish River, and was able to fall in with some Inuit and live out his life with them, and just saying.
So we think...
What town is he from?
He's from Banbridge.
Banbridge. We're going to go there sometime and see.
There's a statue for him.
In the middle of a roundabout, though.
Yeah, but it's right beside his house, where it's got a little blue plaque saying he's discovered the Northwest Passage. Because, although Adamson is the first guy to sail through the Northwest Passage, and he did that about 50 years after the Franklin expedition, apparently they accidentally did discover the Northwest Passage, but it was icebound, so they walked it.
Yeah.
At least part of the way.
And since Franklin was already dead, and God only knows what happened to Fitzjames, Crozier discovered the Northwest Passage.
But they think they know this guy who writes books on the subject thinks he knows whose sword it was, but we don't know who actually gave it to the Inuit. And ironically, if I remember correctly, if instead of trying to walk south down Canada, if they'd just gone west for a couple of 100 miles and stayed there for something like 6 months after they abandoned the ships, they would have been rescued.
Was it a whaler area?
No, because that's where I believe it was the first guys searching for them. That's where they landed, and they landed about 6 months after they abandoned the ships.
Yeah, but they had no way to know that would have happened.
Oh, I know. I'm just thinking that it's like, if only they'd done that. And apparently that's exactly what someone had done about 4 or 5 years earlier in the same sort of area. They'd gone to that point. They weren't as far in as Franklin, but they'd gone to that point and they were rescued.
Well, see, it's all like a very kind of Monday morning quarterback kind of thing. It's like, if only they had done this, if only they had done that. And I guess that's part of what makes this, as a mysteries kind of thing, so mysterious, is there were just so many questions, and there's just no end of expeditions going up there and looking to see what happened to them. And
yeah, like just last year, they discovered the last couple of years, they discovered both ships. The Erebus was discovered in like 2012, and it's in pretty bad shape, but the Terror is apparently immaculate. It was discovered last year. It was discovered because they were searching for it in this place, and then this guy who worked on the searching for it, who's an Inuit, said that several years ago I was out walking on the ice and I came across this big bit of wood jutting out of the ice, and I thought it looked pretty cool, so I took a photo of myself with it. And then... Here's
my scientific selfie. They're like, oh my god.
And then I went home, and by the time I got home, I lost my camera, so I figured it was a bad omen, so I shouldn't have taken the photo. So, I didn't tell anyone about it. But since we were looking for this British ship, maybe we should look where I found that. And they did, and they found the Terror.
I think that's great. Well, I mean, they knew about...
They found the Terror in the already named Terror Bay.
Well, like I said, they have a pretty good idea of the likely coordinates to search in. I mean, but the problem always is the drift from the ice.
Oh yeah, it's just ironic that they found it in the bay named for the ship.
That's like when they found that castle on Castle Street. Do you know, and you can Google this in case you don't believe us, down in the Republic, and one of the times, I think it's close to the border with the North, they quote unquote found this castle that had been lost for a few hundred years. And it was just in like a vacant lot, like under some trees.
Yeah, beside Castle Street.
Yeah, like, you know, it had been like the street that had been named for the castle that people just like forgot was there.
The
I
locals
think that's so great.
The locals knew there was a building there. They just didn't realize it was a castle. They were just like, oh, it's just an old ruin.
I think that's great. They lost a castle, but they found it. Where? On Castle Street, of course. But the reason this is interesting is because Dan Simmons wrote a, quite frankly, amazing book about this called The Terror, and I really suggest you should read it. If you like historical fiction, if you like alternity, it's really good. Now, the only problem is, if you're a light reader, it can get a bit weighty. It is about, I think, like 800 some pages.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, it's basically his hypothesis of what happened.
Except for also with supernatural things.
Yeah, a giant demon bear.
Would you stop spoiling it for people?
Well, it is the terror.
It's not a giant...
That's not the spoiler. There are things you can spoil in the book. That's not the spoiler.
That's a good point.
You know, otherwise it's just a historical book about the thing. I mean, those exist too, but, you know, you haven't read any of them.
Well, not yet. You got me on. But the thing is that, so I was at work, this is back when I worked at Barnes & Noble, and I was reading Entertainment Weekly, and I read, you know, in their book reviews, that I'm like, oh my god, I've always wanted to read a fiction book about this. I thought I'd have to write it myself. And I ran out to the fiction run, and it was there, New in Fiction, and I ran up on my break and bought it in hardcover. And Alita had to come up and okay my my purchase, and she was like, you know, it's a hardcover, you could just borrow it for 2 weeks. And I was like, no, I must own this book. And I literally read it in like 3 days. It was so good. And it ended exactly how I would have ended it if I was one writing the book. So that was, you know, I always cited that as like one of my favorite books. And then, I think this was a few years ago, because I was still living in America, I heard that rights had been sold to adapt it as a TV series.
Yeah, originally the rights were sold to HBO, and Ridley Scott wanted to make the adaptation, but then HBO sort of cooled on the subject. Cooled on it?
Yeah.
And then it was dead in the water, but then then apparently the AMC picked it up. Now, it's being filmed right now. It's starring Jared Harris is playing Captain Crozier. Captain Franklin is being played by Kieran Hines, Jared Harris, who's on The Expanse, who played old Will Robinson in the Lost in Space movie, who was in The Quiet Ones. He's in a bunch of things. Kieran Hines, who played the King Beyond the Wall in Game of Thrones, and Julius Caesar in Rome. He's playing Franklin. Fitzjames is being played by, what do you call him from Rome and Game of Thrones as well? What do you call him? The useless brother of Catelyn Stark. Who played one of the guys who hung around with Caesar but wasn't quite as cool as him in Rome. I forget his name.
A Caesar groupie.
Yeah, like Cassius, or it wasn't Brutus. Brutus was the guy from Resident Evil, but it was one of that gang. So yeah, this is currently filming. It's this apparently 12-part.
And you said it's only showing in Europe and in Canada. It's not showing in the States.
Allegedly, yes. That's what the internet says, that it will not air in the USA. I imagine it'll air at some point, but apparently this is an experiment for AMC where they're just making it for the European and Canadian market.
Well, I mean, he's one of Canada's national heroes, Franklin, even though he's not Canadian. Like, Canada, like, you know, because they kind of, like, adopted him.
Yeah.
But I'm excited. I'm expecting good things out of this.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. I mean, I'm really sad it's not like a Netflix show or an Amazon show, because then you could just get all the episodes at once.
That's a good point. We'll have to wait for it to air. We don't have AMC, so...
So, you know, we'll have to get a hold of episodes somehow and then watch it as they appear, or all at once, whatever.
Well, I wonder if they have an iPlayer kind of thing in Europe, the way that, like, RTE and BBC do. So, like, maybe, like, it could be a thing where we could subscribe directly to AMC, because here's the thing. In the UK... and in our Republic too, I believe, you need what's called a TV license. And that's basically like, instead of paying for cable, I mean, you also can pay for cable, but there are terrestrial channels that you get for free, but they're funded by the government. So basically, like, it's kind of like paying taxes. And it's not that much a year, and you only have to pay for one per household. We don't have a TV license because our TV does not function as a TV. It's hooked up to the PlayStation and the DVD player.
Well, the TV license only counts for the BBC.
Yeah, but it's all the BBC channels though.
Yeah,
it's like
they do a lot of channels, but it's just the BBC. Yeah. If you hypothetically had a TV that was connected to the TV that did not get the BBC, you wouldn't have to pay it.
Well, there's one in the Republic too, because I just saw an article about how now you're going to have to pay it for tablets as well.
Yeah, the Republic has that plus their version of the BBC has adverts. Well, at least the BBC doesn't have adverts.
No. But you should pay, if you get BBC, you should pay your TV license, is what we're saying. But I'm wondering if there's a way that we can just subscribe to AMC over the internet, over streaming.
Don't know.
I don't know, I'll have to look into that. But I just admitted to everyone that we're boring and don't have cable.
Oh,
We can watch YouTube at night.
We've got the internet.
We watch...
Plus, when I'm watching TV or films, I tend to do it while I'm editing.
That's true. Like, I will have something on sometimes, but it won't be something I'm actually watching.
Like, last week, in the last couple of weeks, I've watched the second season of Man in the High Castle and Iron Fist, and I watch them both while editing, and occasionally taking a break to watch films while editing. Things like Beyond the Gates and The Forbidden Zone, stuff like that. And The Institute, which was not very good. It's about abusive sort of orphanage type thing.
Like the Magdalene kind of things?
Set in America, though.
Oh.
Apparently, I don't think I was paying full attention, because apparently there was some sort of shocking secret at the end beyond just mere abuse that I did not understand what was going on.
Shocking.
So something happened that I missed.
If you know, write the show.
Well, it's called, I can't remember what it's called. It's not called The Institute in America. And it came out in 2015. That's its British title. It's named after the actual institute, the American version is.
Oh. See, I forgot about, like, really the only TV show that I watch relatively close to when an episode is aired is Steven Universe. And that's usually because, like, the episode gets posted on YouTube the next day by somebody in 3 parts, so they don't get got by copyright. Oh, what a world. We don't care about TV anymore, except for when it's convenient.
Well, I do my bit. You know, if I like a TV show, I will buy it on DVD. I'm waiting for the fucking Strain season 2 and 3 to come out on Region 2 DVD, and for Luke Cage and all to come out so I can buy that, because I want to support them. I will buy them on DVD.
See, I just really don't watch current TV. Like, if I want to have something on, usually while I'm working on a paper or studying or something like that, it's terrible. I'll put on YouTube on the TV through the PS4, and then watch, like, old forensic television from the 90s. Just to have something on. I don't know why I do that. It's probably pretty weird.
You should watch, I thought you wanted to watch Emerald City.
Yeah, but that would involve, like, commitment.
Well, fair enough. It's on my list to watch while I'm editing. I mean, I'm going to probably start editing a Genesis 7 maybe tonight, so I got to work out what I'm going to watch.
Genesis 7! I would love it if in, like, the last episode they find aliens.
Well, they found an angel in episode 11.
What?
Yeah, they find an angel.
Was it Ambassador Kosh? Ho! Put that in the Wayback Machine. If you got that, you're awesome.
I should probably add that line to the script.
You should, though.
I haven't watched episode 12 yet, because I'm supposed to be doing that as a crossover with Iros, and he hasn't sent me any notes for it yet, so I'm waiting to watch it.
Hasn't it been, like, years you've been waiting for notes?
Well, I actually, although I'm uploading them now, I did watch them and take notes to them, about 14, 16 months ago. Yeah, that's when I scripted most of the season. In, like, a big block of, like, over 10 days, I watched and scripted the entire 11 episodes.
That's gotta be painful.
Oh, it was very painful. But, you know, it meant that I could work on them slowly and upload them when it's convenient. I'm gonna, like, next week, I'm going to be house sitting for my parents and looking after the cats. And
Not next week, it's the week after next week.
Well, it's happening in like 8 days.
Okay.
And I'm going to watch and script as many episodes of a review for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as I can, because a beloved $300 patron requested I do that. Now, Omega really wanted me to do get Steven Universe. You know, them to request
but that. You can't get it's not on DVD. Like some of the episodes are. Although I think I have pretty much most of the run on digital. Well,
she wanted them to request Steven Universe, and I was like, "That's a great idea," because each episode is 10 minutes long, and the rules for the $300 patron is between 1 and 13 episodes. That would be brilliant. each review would be 5 minutes. That would be so easy.
But a lot of Steven Universe we know is good and cute, and I think people want you to watch weird stuff so you can bug out and be like, what the fuck?
Well, the patron, Joshua, he says JoJo is one of his favorite shows, so I'm hoping that it's good. I'm really not an anime person. I've managed to get a hold of the first 7 episodes. It's a challenge to get the rest, so we'll have to see what happens there.
Okay. See, a really funny thing happened to me a wee bit back. This girl that I go to uni with, she was like, oh my gosh, so have you heard of this really bad movie? It's really funny, you should watch it. It's called The Room. And I was like, lol, have I heard of The Room? She hadn't heard of Birdemic, though, so I got to introduce her to that. And so her boyfriend, because we were at the psychology ball, and I was like, oh, you should check us out on YouTube, you know, Diamanda Hagen, I'm Omega, I'm just about. So apparently I think he must have like watched some of the backseat critiques, because then he told her, he was like, it was weird, it was like I was like intruding on their family time. I was like, nah, we put it on YouTube for a reason, you're alright. That's what we do. But yeah, so, I mean, if you want to learn more about the Franklin Expedition, there's loads of resources available online, historic and otherwise.
Yeah, and it's a really fascinating subject. I think it's because it's a mixture of, you got the Victoriana thing, so you've got the British at the height of their hubris. You've got...
Hubris!
You got mystery, you've got sort of really, really sadness, because whatever evidence you find, bad and sad things happen. It's just so sad, and you don't...
It's sad.
It's like a very sad jigsaw, and most of the pieces are missing, but you're getting pieces every so often just being found, and you put them in there, and it's like making it's like you're seeing more of the picture of what sad thing you're looking at. It's
I've never thought about it that way before.
It's a bit like a very, very, very sad car crash that you're seeing from the past.
Well, the reason that I got interested in it, and it, as so many things do in life, it all goes back to trauma. In the mid-'80s, Owen and Beatty, who were the two scientists that went up to Beechey Island and autopsied the 3 bodies that were buried up there.
Well, there's 4 bodies up there, but one of them's not Franklin Expedition.
Well, yeah, but so they weren't autopsying that person, then were they?
Just leave him alone. That body's like, aha, I dodged a bullet there. I'm not being autopsied. But I don't get a photo taken of me.
Dead bodies so frequently say. But no, like, so there was an episode of Nova called Buried in Ice, and I think it's on YouTube.
It is on YouTube. I've watched it.
But so we watched that, and it traumatized me as a child. I guess this is the images, because the bodies were frozen in permafrost, so they were remarkably well preserved. And so they still have very lifelike expressions on their faces, and for some reason I must have been 6 or 7, and it just traumatized me.
Yeah, if you see a picture from the Franklin Expedition, like a photograph, the chances are you're seeing the photo of the mummy of, the ice mummy of John Torrington, who was a stoker on one of the ships. 20-year-old guy. It's like...
And what did he die of?
He died of tuberculosis.
Yep. Paradoxically, because his doctor said, oh, you know, the Arctic air will be good for your tuberculosis. While
you're sitting there in the coal things, throwing coal into the fucking...
Sure, it will be grand. Well, but people were stupid back then. But this traumatized me, but in a kind of way that, like a morbid curiosity, I wanted to know everything, so I have read a lot of books on the subject. One of them was kind of weird. It's called The Franklin Conspiracy, and it's most of it is like a really good historical account, but then your man goes like 180-degree flip, like total conspiracy theory, like, he's like, oh, well, the Admiralty was actually trying to go to the Dreamtime, like the Inuit version of the Australian Dreamtime.
What?
Like, it was a physical place that, and it...
What?
The energies there were, like, comparable to radioactivity, and they wanted to harness that to make nuclear weapons.
What?
And it just went pear-shaped, and I was like... Hold on a second, because all through the book he was teasing the Admiralty might have had nefarious motives, and I thought he was talking about maybe they thought there was oil up there, or something like that, or coal reserves, or there was...
Oil wasn't really a big thing then.
It wasn't, the people were still using whale oil, but I was thinking that if an English scientist had figured out, wait a minute, we could utilize natural oil, and it'll be less expensive than getting whale oil, So I was thinking it's going to be something like that, which is pretty far-fetched, but still technically possible, right? Scientifically, it's technically possible.
I'm not sure why it would be cheaper to get it from the Arctic than just getting some whales.
I don't know.
But it makes more sense than his idea.
Or like there was some kind of strategic resource, like they thought, oh, we can build a base up here. Like I was waiting for a reveal like that. Like a kind of quasi-nefarious, like Victorian era plan.
We can invade the United States through North Alaska.
Yeah, like something that was at least plausible. That's the conspiracy reveal that I was waiting for. But then, like, and he was talking about, like, you know, all these translations from Inuits that speak about the spirit world being a place you can actually go, and then, you know, the account of when the last Inuit to see the last survivors, you know, ascribing their appearance not to, like, scurvy or intense starvation and malnutrition, but radiation sickness. He's like, they were suffering from radiation sickness because they went to the Dreamtime and came back, and all this other kind of stuff.
If the British, if the British government at the time did not took the Inuits so unseriously to such a degree that they ignored their advice on wearing fucking skins and using sled dogs, and eating, you know, seal and shit, then why the fuck would they take them seriously about their fucking religious shit?
I don't know. But then here's the thing.
What
I went online to see if this guy had a website or anything. Come to find out, I think he was involved in writing a screenplay for one of the Godzilla movies. And then he died, like, literally a year before I got the book.
Okay.
So, like, I can't even be like, what were you thinking here? Because, unfortunately, he has passed away. But if you can get a copy of The Franklin Conspiracy, it's really interesting.
It's Frozen in Time is fascinating. That's one that sort of got me interested. That's about the autopsy of the 3 bodies on Beachy Island. And it's got lots of grisly photographs.
Well, there's a really great book that I read as a biography of Franklin called The Man Who Ate His Own Shoes. That's pretty good. There's a fiction book that came out this past summer, at least in the UK. I don't know what the story is with America. I didn't want to actually pay £14.99 sterling for the book, so I opted to buy it on the Kobo app, which was even worse. But it's called Winds of Winter, and it's kind of like half of it takes place in the modern times, half of it takes place back in the times. So that's pretty good.
That's a bit like The Emigrant's Farewell, then. The one that I gave you, which is, this is great. Apparently after the Franklin exposition, there were some people from our fair city of Derry/Londonderry who had a vision about what happened there, and then they went and bothered the poor widow of Franklin with it. And then a local author, I think they're local anyway, wrote a book about this and connecting it with fictional shit in the modern day. So it was like, honey, look, here's a thing about Derry and the Franklin expedition.
And the picture on the back is from the 60s, because you can see, like, the Craig Avon Bridge, but the Peace Bridge hasn't been built yet. Oh, there's also a really good factual book called Ice Blink. I had a copy of that back in the day. That was a pretty good. There's lots of resources if we've whetted your appetite for historical curiosity.
And if you can't be bothered buying a book, there is a blog spot called Visions of the North, where this guy who's written at least one book on the subject and other books too, a historian, sort of just puts up information, news and stuff, and information and sort of ideas he's had about it, and it's truly fascinating.
It seems pretty rational. There's also a German graphic artist who's done several volumes of a graphic novel. Now it's in German, but she has the script in English up on her website for free download.
I really want you to translate that into English, because the visuals are brilliant.
Yeah. So I mean,
one reason I find this so fascinating is the comparisons between, because we don't know anything that happened, who the people were after a certain point. So authors are able to come up with their own sort of versions of the events, trying to fit the known facts of the time they wrote it in the thing. So you can come up with these wildly divergent sort of things starting at the same point.
Oh no, divergence.
So it's a bit like parallel universes. And it's fascinating to see what people do. Like, you wrote a character for your werewolf game, which was the main...
well, no, this was fiction that never ended up getting gone. It was a character who was descendant of one of the people who survived, and they only survived because they were a descendant of werewolves, so there was like werewolf blood along some places.
Yeah, and that was Magnus Manson, who like Magnus Manson, okay, sort of heroic character in your version.
No, he was just kind of around.
Well, still survived, and was decent. And in The Terror, he's basically a giant guy with an IQ of about 50 who's sexually manipulated by the villain and sort of breaks people's brains out and stuff like that. It just... The same people get put into so many different roles depending on what the author did because people know so little about them except for their names.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the nature of historical fiction. Although the one really cool point that the Franklin conspiracy did make is they did have an early daguerreotype developer, and the daguerreotype was the forerunner to the modern film processing. So they had a primitive camera on board. And that would have been really cool to, like, come across, you know...
It's possible it will be come across at some point.
That it's on the Terra and they can raise it.
Well, or it could be found somewhere. I mean, it is not likely, but it's possible. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that really old photographs were found in an old camera in, like, somewhere cold, and the photos were at least partially rescued. So it's possible.
It'd be pretty cool. But I think we've gone on and on and on and on about history for a long time. That's like the entirety of the episode. So if you're in Europe or Canada, look forward to the Terror. If you're in America, well, you're going to have to wait, aren't you?
Yeah, you're going to get to see Julius Caesar punch a bear in the face.
All your wildest fanfic dreams come true.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that has been us for this week. Honey, I have been the Omega Geek, and who do you want to have been this week?
Cornelius Hickey.
I knew you were going to say that. I was just waiting for you to say that.
It's the villain in the Terror.
Might not have been a villain in real life. Probably was just some guy. Apparently
the only information we know about him in real life is his name, because he's on the crew roster, and they found a knife with his name and initials at one of the starvation points where cannibalism happened, and his knife appears to have been actually one of the surgeon's scalpels with bone attached to the blade.
He stole it.
I really don't think he stole it.
I don't think he did either.
Because, yeah, the knives and... Basically, when you're on ship and you're eating boiled food, you don't need a strong knife. If you're trying to walk to safety, you need a knife, so...
In the presence of bears. Unspirit bears.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure they were given out. When you replace the handle himself, it'd probably be used in a lot of different ways. But yeah, this poor guy, he did... that's all we know about him, but apparently he's like a crazy guy with a god complex who murders a bunch of people and decides to become a cult leader, and he's so horrible that the demon bear doesn't even want to eat his soul.
Spoilers.
But he's gonna die at the end. Everyone dies. It's hardly a spoiler. It's
spoilers,
like saying,
the Titanic sunk.
Yeah, this guy, he died. You know, he was horrible and evil and died when the Titanic sunk.
Spoilers, we know how World War II ended. Hitler died. I will see you next week.